How to install Windows 101 with NZ Builder. In this video we will cover the installation of Windows from prepping your openings to installing head flashings all the way through to finishing off. I'll break down some of the building details from wanz bars to fixing and more. Make sure you keep watching as throughout this video I'll share my tips for streamlining the process. The journey of Windows to getting in here starts well before at planning stage. At the planning stage we list out a Windows schedule. It's usually the very last page of the working drawings. On that schedule it has every single window and door that we're going to be using on the exterior of our build. Not only does it show the overall height of the windows, but it shows the height from the floor to the windowsill as well as the width. It tells you what type of window is going to go in, it shows you the material, the glazing specified, and even denotes the direction of an opening. You can see that here in the dotted line. If you've watched our framing video, you'll know that windows aren't actually load bearing. So what we need to do is take the load of whatever is above the window and put a lintel in there in the framing and send it to either side, and that gets done at framing stage. We call the framing the daylight opening. Typically an install window should have a 10mm gap between the back of the rear view and the framing. And so you always make the joinery unit 20mm smaller than the daylight opening. This is why we get all of our jobs site measured before we order the windows. And that's a perfect time to pick up any issues, make any changes. Me personally on my build, that was when I deleted a couple of windows, I raised a couple of windowsills, I changed a sliding door. This morning I had to undo and move this wall here in this massive beam. We had to undo it and move it across 800 mils. Fun times. If you are going to make any joinery changes, the optimum time is framing. And then your window guy or girl will come and measure up according to what you've got framed up. They then do a production sheet. The production sheet gets sent to the factory. Now the factory will cut and order all of the aluminium and glass. We use aluminium in the majority of our builds. That all gets cut and made in a factory off that production sheet. That's why framing is the point of no return. That's where it gets harder and harder and more expensive to make changes to your joinery. So then we need to do a couple of things to the window opening on site. The main one is that we need to tape it up with flashing tape. Think of flashing tape as an extra layer of protection. If for some reason water got behind all of the other layers we do, it would then hit this flashing tape and it would ideally get directed out and onto the paper and out the cavity. That would be the most ideal scenario. I mean, the most ideal scenario would be that you don't get any water in there in the first place. We have to tape the windowsill and 200 mils up either side, and that has to cover the entire sill and then get folded over the face. If you're not using protector wrap that you can stretch around the corners, you have to butterfly the sides. And then we do a 200 mil in either top corner as well. And if we're on a cavity, we'll put what's called a wanz bar. W-A-N-Z, wanz bar. I personally call them wanz bars. I think it's easier than saying wanz. It literally stands for Window Association of New Zealand. So random. So we install the Window Association of New Zealand bar for extra support. A good place to find information and details on how to install Windows, wanz bars and more is either at brands or at wganz.org.nz. That's the Window and Glass Association of New Zealand. They have a window installation guide. While you're laying here watching this video, I want you to think about one thing. Only 20% of viewers are subscribed to NZ Builder. Guys, what's going on? If you want me to keep making videos like this, go ahead, click subscribe. It really does help the channel out. Wanz bars are required on all window and door units with a trim opening over 600 mils wide. Because you've got this 20mm cavity, your aluminium framing is hanging out so much more than it used to. So in the old days we used to do what's called direct fix. Direct fix is when you nail your weatherboard directly to your framing, direct fix. Now we do what's called a cavity, and that's a 20mm timber strip. That means everything else gets pushed out another 20mm. So your window, all of that glass and aluminium is hanging out and relying so much more on the timber reveal. So we put in this bar, and that takes all the weight and spreads the load of the sill evenly and ties it back to the framing. The generic fixing method into timber is 10 gauge times 50mm stainless steel screws positioned at the end of each bar and a maximum of 300 centers in between. So once your wanz bar is installed, you can see how it basically works as an extension for the sill trimmer, giving your joinery unit more support when your windows are slid into place. One real important thing here to note when setting up wanz bars or windows in general is that you want the tops of all your windows to line up, especially on a face where there's multiple windows. The first thing you do before you even start the windows, you should have a datum, a level line running around your building, and you would use this as a reference point to measure heights, in particular the tops of all your windows, and then you'd work down. Like every other phase of building, we measure it and we mark it out, and we use things like string and pencil before we lock it off. So this is the timber reveal here. In majority of builds, again, this is pre-primed pine. We have done this as like a remove finish, depending on what's going into the floor, or sometimes we do no reveal on the floor. You can make these out of whatever timber you want, but again, majority of builds will paint this, and the architrave, that'll all get painted, that's your trim color. 99% of the time they are attached to the window when they come to site. You know, as a builder, we can take them out and adjust them if we need. There's been instances where I've taken a second-hand joinery unit, taken the reveals out, made a bigger one. Basically, they're just stapled to the aluminium framing at a preset location. The staples are on this side of the joinery. That's how it's all joined together. So your windows are made and they're ready for delivery. What next? Well, we install the doors and windows using pairs of 75 by 3.15 galvanized jolt heads or 8 gauge times 65mm stainless steel screws through the reveals into the surrounding framing at a maximum of 450 centers, so no more than 450mm centers along the sills, jambs, heads, and no more than 150 mils from the ends of the reveal. Whether you're using jolts or screws, make sure you've got a supply of that. Make sure that all of your window openings are ready. Yeah, make sure you got like your drills ready, your impacts ready, and make sure you got the manpower or woman power. Girls can lift windows too. So a little baby window like this, we could lift it in one piece, everything in it, it's good to go. One person on the outside lifts it up, one person on the inside fixes it off. If it's a larger unit, you might need 2 people on the outside holding it. There's a door over there. That needed 4 people. We also took the door off. So there's some tricks like that. If it's really heavy, we'll do what's called sight glazing. So we just get the frame sent, and that's reasonably light. We lift that in, make sure that's mint, and then they come and put the glass in on site later. We can use suction cups on the glass, or we can use little grabbers which grab onto the reveal, or just a good old bicep curl. What I think is best practice when you are first putting your window in the opening is to get it reasonably centered and plumb and level right off the bat. Some builders feel the pressure of the delivery driver and the rush, and they'll just go around and tack everything, and that works, but you can get unstuck later on where you've tacked it in the wrong place and now you need to move it 10 mils this way or 10 mils that way, and it just means you have to come back and do everything a second time. If you can get it as close to perfect as possible the first time, you're not leaving a job that you have to come back and do later. So use the approved fixings, fix your window off, plumb, level, centered. And the other thing to think about is before you put all your windows in, make sure your head height is the same the whole way around. Sometimes we've seen it in pre-nail frames or even self-built frames, there's minor variations, and so you want to work from your head height down, not your sill height up. Once your window's in place, you've double checked everything and you're happy with how it's sitting, you can now finish off by adding the head flashing. The head flashing directs water to the wall cladding outside, keeping your home nice and dry. They are glued down, nailed and taped. From here you can carry on with your cavity batten and get your council inspection before you do your pre-line weatherboard. One of the last things we need to do to finish off installing our joinery units is close up the 10mm gap with expanding foam. But I like to leave this until the cladding is done. The reason being is that sometimes you may need to pull a window in or out, or just even pop a corner out to be able to help you get your cladding where it should be. Especially if you have a real tight corner and you've got to get a cut, you've got to tuck it behind the head flashing, you've got to slide it behind the window. There's a lot happening. Sometimes the only way to do that is to move the window. If you've rushed ahead and you've locked your windows off and you've spray foamed them, there's no way you're going to move that bad boy. It's going to make cladding really hard. After fixing the window in place, it's important to remove any packers that you've been using from the head of the unit. Perf rod is installed to close up the 10mm gap. It's a backing for the foam. We then apply an expanding polyurethane foam to ensure it's airtight. This stops any drafts from the outside and helps to keep the home insulated. Don't go crazy on a can of foam, but it is really satisfying to cut it back.